technical problems.
Jama diban ni pinya pamali de. Jama to nge computer ya alom lo do.
Thank all the speakers.
Di jama ne di speaker si akong long ko le cheers tin ba le.
Thanks to the 45 right teams.
45 right ko le jama cheers tin ba le.
I'm in the political journey and standing for the people, for the Burmese people, and especially for the Rohingya.
Di Bama video re Rohingya video re yati video cheers tin ba le. Di MBC diနိုင်ငံသားဖြစ်မှုစီစီကပြားကကျွန်တော်ရှေ့အနောက်ပြန်သွားရင်အဲ့တော့ဒီနိုင်ငံသားဖြစ်ဒီကွင်းကအဲ့ဒါကအဲ့တော့နိုင်ငံသားလူသားတယောက်ကိုအခွင့်အရေးတွေရရှိစေတဲ့ဟာပဲဖြစ်ပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီရကောင်းမင်းလွတ်လပ်စွာတောက်လှုပ်ရှားခွင့်တွေနိုင်ငံပြင်သွားကိုယ်နိုင်ငံပြန်ပြည်လို့အဲ့လိုအခွင့်အရေးတွေပေါ့နော်အဲ့တော့ကံမကောင်းစားပဲဒီအခွင့်အရေးတွေကအများဒီရိုဂျာတွေအပြင်အဲ့တော့ဒီတခြားလူတွေကရရှိနေတဲ့ဟာဖြစ်ပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ကျမတို့ရိုဂျာတွေကတော့အဲ့အခုကျမတို့အဲ့တော့ကျမတို့ရဲ့ဒီမိခင်ဒီပေါ့နော်မိမြေဒီမြန်မာနိုင်ငံမှာလက်ခံဖို့ရတော့ကစူးစမ်းနေရတော့ဖြစ်ပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ကျမတို့ဒီတခြားမြန်မာနိုင်ငံသားများလိုပဲအခွင့်အရေးတွေကိုရရှိနိုင်မှုအတွက်အဲ့တော့ဒီ British colony ချိန်တုန်းက Rohingya အဲ့တော့နိုင်ငံသားအနေနဲ့အခွင့်အရေးတွေအကုန်ရခဲ့တယ်အဲ့တော့1942မှာအဲ့ဒီဖက်စစ်တပ်တွေဝင်လာတဲ့ခါမှာဒီမြန်မာစစ်တပ်ရဲ့ဖက်စစ်ရခိုင်နေအဲ့တော့ကျမတို့ကိုအဲ့တော့ဒီတောင်ပိုင်းကလူတွေကိုကျမတို့မောင်းထုတ်တယ်ဒီမြောက်ပိုင်းရခိုင်signal to the general အဲ့ဒါက so this tool အဲ့တော့ဒါကလူမျိုးတုံးတပ်ဖြတ်မှုရဲ့အစပဲဖြစ်တယ်အချက်ပြပဲဖြစ်တယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီလိုဒီလူမျိုးတုံးတပ်ဖြတ်မှုရဲ့ဒီနီလန်းကိုစနစ်တကျသုံးခဲ့တာဖြစ်တယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီစေအုပ်ချုပ်ရေးတွေမကဘူးဒီမိုကရေစီအုပ်ချုပ်ရေးမှာလည်းသုံးခဲ့တယ်လွတ်လပ်ရပြီးတဲ့နောက်မှာအဲ့တော့ဘယ်လိုပြောရမလဲအဲ့တော့မူဂျာဟဒီနီနဲ့ဒီတင်မာမှုတွေဖြစ်တယ်အဲ့တော့သူတို့နေနဲ့တိုက်နေအဲ့ပထမဆုံးဒီမြန်မာနိုင်ငံရဲ့ဝန်ကြီးချုပ်ဦးနုအဲ့တော့မှအပြစ်ခတ်ရပ်ပြီးလုပ်လိုက်တယ်Mayu frontier administrative area အမပြီးခဲ့တယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီစိတ်တစ်ပိုင်းကိုပိုင်းအောင်ချုပ်ခွင့်ဒေတာပေါ့ပြီးလိုက်တယ်အဲ့တော့1988ရောက်တဲ့ခါမှာအဲ့1961မှာ61မှာဒီစစ်တပ်ကအာဏာသိမ်းလိုက်တယ်အဲ့တော့ဗကြုံနေဝဲကနေပြီးတော့အဲ့မှာစစ်စင်ရေးဖြစ်တယ်1988မှာအဲ့တော့တမိုင်းမှာလည်းတွေ့နေတယ်နဂါမင်းစစ်စင်ရေးလုပ်ခဲ့တယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီတသိန်းကနေအသိန်းခွဲရိုဟင်ဂျာတွေကရခိုင်ပြည်ကနေထွက်ပြေးရတယ်ဘင်္ဂလားဒေ့ရှ်ထွက်ပြေးရတယ်အဲ့ဒီနောက်ပိုင်းမှာအဲ့တော့ဘင်္ဂလားဒေ့ရှ်ကနေပြီးကူညီပေးတယ်အဲ့သူတို့ဘယ်လိုဖြစ်ခဲ့မှမသိ
systematically the persecution for the Rohingyas were used what do you say, the citizenship rights that we were enjoying it took over, and then our status got into worsen and worsen, and then it came 1982. Then in 1982, then we were given, instead of an RC.
ဒီ82ခုနှစ်မှာကျမတို့ကဒီ NRC စားကျမတို့ပန်းရောင်ကားစားကျမတို့ white card တွေပဲပေးတယ်ကျမတို့ကကျမတို့တမိုင်းမှာဒီဌာနေတိုင်းသားဖြစ်တော့လေကျမတို့ဒီဌာနေတိုင်းသားအနေနဲ့ဖြစ်တယ်ကံကောင်းစွာပဲစနစ်တကျပဲဒီကနေပြီးတော့ခွဲခြားဆက်ဆံတဲ့လူမျိုးတို့တပ်ဖြတ်မှုတဲ့ဒီစီးမြင့်တွေကထွက်လာတဲ့ဒီစစ်ဆိုးရတယ်မကဘဲနဲ့ဒီ2015ဒီမိုကရေစီအစိုးရကိုနိုင်ကလည်းချမှတ်ခဲ့တယ်ဒီ NBC လုပ်ငန်းစဉ်ကခုတည်းထိသုံးနေတော့မယ်ကျမတို့ခုတည်းထိဒါကိုသုံးဖို့ညှင်းပယ်နေတော့ဖြစ်ပါတယ်ဒီ1982ဥပဒေနဲ့ NBC တို့ကဒါကခွဲခြားဆက်ဆံတဲ့ပုံစံဖြစ်ပါတယ်ကျမတို့ရဲ့အခွင့်အရေးတွေကိုပေးဖို့အတွက်လည်းကျမတို့တောင်းဆိုပါတယ်ကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်ဒေါက်တာပါဗင်
to share a little bit more about his work on accountability and where things are going with the ICJ case.
ဒီ ICJ မှာဘာဖြစ်နေလဲဆိုတာနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးအာစတြေးလန်ကိုကျမလွှဲပေးပါမယ်ကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ် Amy ကျွန်တော် Fortify Rights ကျေးဇူးတင်ဒေါက်တာ Dan John ဒီကြီးတဲ့
really important and helpful report in
ဒါလည်းအခုမြည်ဖြစ်တဲ့ဒီ report ကိုပေါ့နော်အဲ့တော့ရိုဟင်ဂျာတွေဘာတွေဖြစ်နေကြလဲဆိုတာလည်းပေါ့အဲ့တော့ဒီနိုင်ငံသားစစ်မှုစီစီကပြနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့ပေါ့နော်အဲ့တော့ဒီလုပ်ငန်းစဉ်ဟာအဲ့တော့အဲ့တော့ဒီဟာကလက်ရှိဖြစ်ပွားနေတဲ့မြန်မာနိုင်ငံဖြစ်ပွားနေတဲ့လူမျိုးတပ်ဖြတ်မှုတွေကိုအကူအညီပေးနေဖြစ်ပါတယ်ကျွန်တော်နေဖြည်းဖြည်းပြောပါမယ်အဲ့တော့ကျွန်တော်ဒီမှာsimultaneous interpretation ရှိတဲ့အတွက်ကျွန်တော်ဖြည်းဖြည်းပဲပြောပါမယ်
as a brief reminder
အဲ့တော့ကျွန်တော်ဒီတမ်းပြီးသတိပေးရမယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီ Gambia နဲ့မြန်မာနိုင်ငံဟိုတရားစွဲထားတဲ့ ICJ မှာတရားစွဲထားမှာ
back in 2019
2019မှာဒီတရားစွဲခဲ့တယ်
in December of 2019
ဒီဇင်ဘာ2019မှာကြားနာမှုတွေလုပ်ခဲ့တယ်
Gambia's request for provisional measures
Gambia နေပြီးတော့မှဒီ Rohingya ပြည်သူတွေကိုကာကွယ်ဖို့အတွက် provisional measures တွေလုပ်ခဲ့ပါတယ်ချမှတ်ခဲ့ပါတယ်
in January of 2020
January 2020မှာ
provisional measures against Myanmar
မြန်မာနိုင်ငံအပေါ်မှာဒီ provisional measures တွေချမှတ်ခဲ့တယ်
genocide and to take
အဲ့တော့ဒီလူမျိုးတပ်ဖြတ်မှုတွေကိုမကျူးလွန်နိုင်မှုတွေ provisional measures ချခဲ့တယ်ပေါ့နော်
periodically
အဲ့တော့နောက်ပြီးတော့မှဒီတရားရုံးကိုနှစ်တစ်ချိန်ပြန်သတင်းပို့ဖို့အတွက်ပေါ့နော် provisional measures တွေလှုပ်ဆောင်လားမလှုပ်ဆောင်လားဆိုတာနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့
continues
အဲ့တော့အမှုအဆက်သွားနေဦးမယ်အဲ့တော့နောက်ဆုံးအဆင့်မှာတော့အမှုက
Myanmar had filed what are preliminary objections these are
အဲ့တော့ဒီကနဦးကန့်ကွက်မှုတွေမြန်မာနိုင်ငံရဲ့လှုပ်ထားတယ်အဲ့တော့အဲ့ဒီဟာနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးကြားနာမှုတွေလုပ်ခဲ့တယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီနေ့ February မှာလုပ်ခဲ့တယ်အဲ့တော့အဲ့ဒီကနေပြီးတော့မှဒီတရားရုံးကနေပြီးတော့မှအဲ့ဒီဟာနဲ့ပို့ပြီးတော့ဆုံးဖြတ်ချက်ချဖို့ရှိတယ်အဲ့တော့ court ကတရားရုံးကနေပြီးတော့မှဒီမြန်မာဆိုရရဲ့ကနဦးကန့်ကွက်မှုတွေကိုချမှတ်ပြီးမြန်မာအနေနဲ့အဲ့တော့ဒီ case ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့တုံ့ပြန်မှုတွေပေးအောင်မှဖြစ်တယ်
case
October. The October ma Gambia ka di ka to through a brief baby that today.
And eventually, once Myanmar files its substantive brief on our memorial, then we would have the court would be in a position either to
I'm at the
round of briefing.
Now the car briefing local, now the car local she nine.
Mention all that because I know many people are wondering how long is the case going to take.
To Romina, the teaching that case couple of Jamale, Sura.
And unfortunately, it's
come comes of
a little ways to go because of
set out my pit,
court gives for the governments involved. But I do want to make clear that proceeding
the Mua set be
reports have been filed on time.
The implementation report chain guy in Hare.
Work of human rights organizations and
the human rights policy, human rights defense Runja policy
going on.
Let's see Babin in Hale Surago, through the Anibiro see Canibare. Gambia Ganibiro, the report don't univare. The DIO, the people to them go
whether the provisional measures are sufficient.
The provisional measures is the low la Surago, some piano mood.
And just coming back to the report,
report would be
influential, I think, and helpful because detail about how cards,
the
broader web of discriminatory and restrictive policies.
The champion, the cantas
For a number of years. Violent clearance operations aren't happening in northern Rakhine State at the moment.
The Leshimale, the Yakai Baima, the Shilling Sissy, Sabio Lonely, the Quajas and Muaradi,
health services and education.
The Jamai Pina Yeluhari, now below the Mayarari, now below Titalamu Cantadari.
Authorities, as is made clear in the report,
the Anabanika
linked the NVC process.
The Nandapimu Sisi Kabalungas in there.
Travel are often arrested and
The Kita with Josai Runjaria, Pankare, Roga, NVC Kamapa when the Kita Lagomikau.
Repatriated back to Myanmar are being forced to take the NVC card.
Around the Manangopian Yao Winla, Runjariga, the NVC Kago logo, the teacher Kaisi Kare.
And as is made clear in the report,
the report Malaysian,
to force the Rohingya to
the Logan Singa,
rights to
through the Naganapi
accept their place as non-citizen state.
The solo Viro Mabono, the through Nanganam Shipu, Nanganam Hodo Chinu, Latin Lecture Lakan kind of Chini.
And so I just wanted to reiterate our thanks to all of the Rohingya who contribute to these reports.
The Rapogo,
Vendors who do the important work.
Human rights defenderiga. The Rapogo, Madandi Nedema, Pawone, the Chisine.
To hopefully provide
Diani Piro.
and for others.
The Rupukani Bidoma, the Gani Bidoma, Rohingya Ludu, Jamara Mudipina Melodiolin.
Thank you for that, Arslan, and to all our panelists.
Jaro panelists in as Lengola Chisimare.
Hear more about where this report, the findings and the recommendations of the report.
The report, Tracy Chetty, Champi Chetty.
On the webinar to also ask questions.
Jaro the webinar ma Migone pick over the Zoom actually Zoom chat function and a bidole Milu Yavare. Facebook and comment on a Milu Yavare. the webinar attended la to the any biro male the lem out the icon leo ne biro mego milo yavare.
Let us know your affiliation.
Poesia le Name now biro bedu mego major les rao popia beba.
And
Arajama again go mijinaga.
The term genocide by attrition. This is the title.
The Zaza Ayachini is the Lumiro Tapia Musure. The choke of Memada and Majini Bono
represents what is taking place in Myanmar and for the Rohingya people.
Bari Piponi Lebono, the Galona Patagio.
It's a great question.
Dale will call him Migum Chipare.
And for me, the easiest
Jonathan Caro
to perhaps understand it is through a metaphor.
Dada things I'm to put it.
And it drop by drop by drop.
The searching. Hello, but things I'm joining.
It can erode mountains.
Dame a change ally.
A corrosive effect.
Down Nilo Piedame. The searching below to Chasa Donna Lesora.
There's a tendency in reports like these to
the way Chobamuli down reported them a matandina. Midazu, Pina, Jama, for Yama and Winnie.
Those things, but we do not always pay close enough attention
to know.
Interlock.
Any Queen Chupamudi got changing below chase and the lesser to know the cuddling since that big down. The Napi Capia
Structure with which the
diet
and local
the Suya
and Rakhine state
the Yakaimia Baima, the Anabania.
Rights, and then systematically
The Senate Ja, the Queen Yarigo, Queen Yido, Senate Jada, Nimpe, they have.
violations are not spectacular.
Two Amulia.
Operations when you're looking at 750,000 people on but an individual
General, the thing of big the Chinese
they're not just dreams and aspirations for a better future, but they're very being the core of what makes them a person, in this case a
Lupiago Pisile, Arari go through a Nipe Cane,
time and time again.
Aronizin,
Have the card, but if
Arakam Shiusoin,
you have effectively denied who you are.
the Kayalushin le Koga Badusure, Pitimu, Nipe Cane.
Heart goes out to them. We call it genocide by attrition.
The Anajim, Lumuro Tapia Munsuraga,
These kinds of
Dilo Musarika.
execution against
That the Rohingya Boma, the Nipani Semuni that Pimatara Pide.
ability to reproduce themselves and their families as
Through yet Rohingya, Mupago, Pipinamu,
with livelihoods and so on, because everything
through yet the Sauni, Boari,
and persecuted and
oh, Dari, Nipe Cane, Nipani Secane.
link the terms.
General, I don't know, chase at her people.
Absolutely, really poetic way of putting it, and for describing a situation that we also see on the
Tomorrow, the people need a chini go, send up with the Chizimare.
This one goes to Arsalan, and it's from a second
Arsalan,
student who's from Yangon.
The Mananga, the Julian Chaunaga, Metaraga.
It's a question I think we all have.
General, Mama, she and Megum Chipare.
But Arslan, maybe you can enlighten us. His question is,
to me go on.
winning the case? And
The ICJ Mare, the Amuga 990 Chinia Balala Shile.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you to the
Mego made a do legis the Mare.
it's a hard question to
People can Megum Chipare.
into how the court will ultimately rule.
Below the Ayonga Sophia Chamlas run up at the Bureau.
That the court has established a very high bar, a very high standard. The hard part of a case for genocide is to a particular group.
အဲ့တော့ဒီလိုမျိုးတိကျအုပ်စုတစုကိုဘယ်လိုမျိုးဖြည့်ဆည်းလဲဆိုတဲ့ဟာကိုတက်တည်ပြဖို့ဖြစ်ပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ကဒါကိုတက်တည်ပြဖို့လိုအပ်ပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီတက်တည်ထွက်ဆိုမှုတွေအဲ့တော့ဒါတွေကဒီလိုတချို့သော policy တွေပေါ်မှာဒီလိုရွေးချက်ရှိတယ်ဆိုတာ
and we also have to remember that the court has yet to ever make a finding of state responsibility for genocide
အဲ့တော့ဒီလူမျိုးတပ်ဖြတ်မှုအတွက်ဒီနိုင်ငံတော်ဘိုင်းကတရားတာဝန်ရှိမှုကိုတက်တည်ပြဖို့လိုအပ်တယ်
in the Bosnia case the court made a finding
Bosnia မှာ
of genocide with the
အဲ့တော့ဒီတရားရုံးကနေပြီးတော့မှတကယ်ကိုပဲ active genocide ရှိတယ်ဆိုတာကိုသုံးဖြတ်ချက်ချခဲ့တယ်အဲ့တော့အဲ့ဒီမှာတာဝန်ရှိသူတွေရောပေါ့အဲ့တော့မြန်မာနိုင်ငံမှာလည်းအဲ့တော့ဒီအစိုးရကိုဒီတာဝန်ရှိမှုတာဝန်ခံခိုင်းမှုပေါ့နော်စူးစမ်းနေတယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီနေရာမှာဒီဒီရွေးချက်ရှိနေလုပ်ခဲ့တယ်ဆိုတဲ့တက်တည်တွေတွေ့တယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီခွဲခြားဆက်ဆံတဲ့မူဝါဒတွေအမုန်းစကားတွေအဲ့တော့လိင်ချမ်းဖက်မှုတွေအဲ့တော့ဒီရက်စက်မှုတွေအဲ့တော့ဒီစစ်စင်ရဲ့သဘောတဘာဝတွေအဲ့တော့နောက်ပြီးတော့ဒီအဲ့တော့ဒီတက်တည်ခံထောက်ထားတွေကိုဖျက်ဆီးတဲ့ဟာတွေအဲ့တော့ဒါတွေကလည်းတချို့ဟာတွေကဒါတိုက်ရိုက်တက်တည်ခံထောက်ထားတွေပေါ့အဲ့တော့ဒီတပ်ဖြတ်မှုတွေကျူးလွန်နေတဲ့အချိန်မှာစစ်သားတွေရဲ့ပြောဆိုမှုတွေ
So I think we have a very strong case but I don't
အဲ့တော့ကျွန်တော်အားကောင်းတဲ့အမှုဖြစ်ပါတယ်
that the Gambia has to meet here it is a high bar
အဲ့တော့ဒီဟာကလည်းဒါစံမြင့်တဲ့ဟာဖြစ်ပြီးတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့အနေနဲ့အဲ့ level တစ်ခုကို Gambia အနေနဲ့ရအောင်လဲသွားမှာဖြစ်ပါတယ်Mohammed Rizwan ရဲ့မိကုံးပေါ့နော်
directly I've never done this before so I'm going to try and make this happen oh there we go
okay.
So I think Mr. Mohammed you're now in the room and I think you can
Mohammed ကအခန်းထဲရောက်ပါပြီ room ထဲရောက်ပါပြီ Mohammed အနေနဲ့မိကုံးမေးလို့ရပါပြီ
Can you hear us
ကြားလားကျွန်တော်တို့ပြောတာကို
Mr. Mohammed Rizwan.
Good morning to all of you.
Hello, Minglawa. Assalamu alaikum.
Do you have a question for one of the panelists?
Hello, the panel ko mego mya Malaysia shi ba la? Panelist ko mego mya Malaysia shi ba la?
There may be some connection issues.
The nene connection ya ma kaung thin ne.
Mohammed, can you ask your question?
Mr. Mohammed,
I wanna ask our community leader.
Community leader ko meet ma. MBA province ko meet ma le. Rohingya bata saka ne meet ma le.
Yes, please.
Yes.
ပြောပါ
Walaikum salam.
Ji, I am the Muhammad Rizwan. I am the Arkan or Fatar Gillar.
जी.
So I have Malaysia लोगों से मान के हम मलेशिया में जाते थे.
जी.
तो RR 45 आइटम में क्या नेशनल NBC कार्डर मुताबिक डिस्कशन कर सकते हैं ऑनलाइन मानिए ऑनियो मानिए आर लेबास रे आर यहाँ ना ऑने ट्रांसलेशन को दियो कला आती आए फंडा होती ही जावे मानिए आए 2017 में जे पास या फ्री जी 10 क्लास में जी पास ये फ्री वाले फेल गिलाम बोय फेल ताई बारे বিয়া এক বছর বইতে পারে 2019 মধ্যে আরবার একটা দেড় হয়ে গেছিলাম ভাই তো লকডাউন জড়িয়ে আরবার বিনা পারি তো হেঙ্গিনা আরতি হাসবে অনেক জানা দিয়ে যাবে আরতি বরং মাঝে ইংলিশ করিয়ান সদূর কমজোর দিয়ে অনেক হাসবে জানো আর হেতু অনেক ইংলিশ কথা না জানি দিয়ে যাবে হাসবে অনেক আর কোমবিত যে লিডার আছে আল্লাহ অনেক রেপ্রেজেন্টেটিভ সাইডে হাসবে বিশেষ করে আর অপরচুনিটি দিয়ে আল্লাহ আর গিওস জেনারেশনের মোতালেক generation bitat niya yo generation bitat yan dar hagut to mono hodde arat ti aide nangda kol aras bowas in nani ki guzuri gigai nanti aide arar generation kol future generation kol la arat in mushkilat maje samna karana hordilla onara e rasta mein ke real mein kamyabiyat de pandai hun to mojila ashad do madgari ara youth generation jitni তো মতরবর্তী খানা অনার লগে হনা হতা হন মুলাই কোন অনার সুরো বাই হিসাবে তো এই মর হতার মে অনার বেশি বুঝুন নাই বিয়াদি মাস থাকে অনার বেগুনতে মাসন সামর তো ইয়ান্দা যে আরাম মে আছে দে 45 রাইটার জুম মিটিং মাঝে তার অনার বেগুন খানা ট্রান্সলেশন করে দিও তো অনার হতা মুহুনি বলা হিসাবে তৈরি আছেন ইন্সপিরেশন করে রোহানজা ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ মে মুহুন মধ্যে কালা ইংলিশ কথা দূর মাটি ক্রিটিস নট হিসাবে অনার আছে না অনার ফায়দা মুদ্রা আসসালামু আলাইকুম ওয়া রাহমাতুল্লাহি
Okay.
I think
yeah, Amy, I think there was a translation came, or do I need to? This is a gentleman, a young boy who had to leave the country, and he was studying there, but due to the COVID and other issues, documentations issues, he had to leave to Malaysia, and now he's just requesting that to think about the young generation. Who are still suffocating and living these atrocities inside the Arakan. So he wanted to thank you people, especially the 45 Rights, for launching this report. And it seems like he's quite upset, very hurt. He said, because we were neglected from our rights, we were never given the rights today. It's very difficult for me to speak in English and to talk in English to express myself. So he just were thanking you people and thanking me. So, and he said, please do not forget about the youth generation. 45 Rights have been doing a lot of work, and such kind of documentations, it's really very important for the Rohingyas. We Rohingyas were unable to write, we were unable to document, and these atrocities have been happening. As I said recently, that we were enjoying the rights, and then came this full citizenship rights, then the pink rights, pink cards, then the white cards we were forced, now NVC. It is a very good document, and to show to the world, and especially to the accountability organizations and the processes, to put the weight that the genocide tool as using our identification and the genocide tool further. My question is to our friend and brother Suleiman. Does it give you more weight to the people who are working for the ICJ, ICC, or to the Gambia? Will you submit such kind of documents which are officially reported by our 45 Rights and others? Will it put a weight to process, or will it still be the same? Or what process, such kind of important reports, can they do something for us to get the justice? Because after all, we came in 2017, and from 2017, a 5-year-old boy became a 10 became a 15, and 15 became a 20, and there are 10,000 of our youth living over there who are supposed to go for education. Our children, more than 60% living in this camp, they need to live a normal life. This is not the life that they are living. And besides that, such reports, does the international community and the accountability process should not carry on because there are only 300 and 350 Rohingyas left over, and still 120 Rohingyas are still living in the refugee camps, IDP camps in Sittwe. How such reports can put more weight? Because if I see this report, I hear the report, I feel there is already a huge weight which should fasten and speedy our process of accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll jump in, Amy, if that's okay. Yes, Ambia, good to see you. And these reports are absolutely helpful. They are helpful for accountability processes like the ICJ case, because this type of report includes testimony from victims who are experiencing the discrimination of these processes. It also includes citations and references to the actual decrees and government policies that are implementing this, that show the actual discriminatory policies in action. And we have been using these types of reports as we update the court periodically through these implementation report procedures. And certainly in our memorial, in the Gambia's memorial, we cited to these types of reports, including reports by Fortify Rights and other human rights organizations, in order to provide the documentary evidence of the violations and the genocidal actions that we are seeking the court to recognize and declare as such. So it is absolutely important. But I also want to emphasize, because you're talking about the Rohingya who want to live their lives, who want to get back to education, who want to go back eventually, of course, to their homeland in Myanmar, when there is a ability for them to do that in a safe and dignified manner. And so I think these type of reports should also put pressure on governments in the region, on Malaysia, on Indonesia, on ASEAN, on Western governments, the United States, the UK, Canada, others. I hope that they will be reading this report carefully, and I hope that this report will help them to implement the types of measures that are recommended in the report, the type of measures that will hopefully lead to changes in these policies and relief for the Rohingya who are in Myanmar, as well as creating that pathway for people to come back. But the accountability processes take time, and the accountability processes are backwards looking. They're looking at trying to find some sort of remedy for violations that have happened. They're not the best mechanism for dealing with the forward-looking situation, which is how do you create the conditions on the ground to allow people to live their lives freely again, and for people who were forced to leave the country to be able to come back. For that, the accountability processes are helpful and they're a part of the puzzle, but a really big part of that puzzle, that solution, is the political pressure from the international community, from other actors, regional actors as well, who have leverage with the Myanmar authorities and who can seek to have the change that's necessary implemented. It's a process that will involve many actors working together, and these reports are important because it creates a basis, it creates a stable foundation of evidence and knowledge that all actors can look to and cite and use to act upon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Perveen, and also Arsalan. We're still kind of working out how the translation works, but it was really helpful to have that summary. So thank you so much, Dr. Perveen. There's another question from Denise, who is with the Jesuit Refugee Services in Cambodia. She has an interesting question around the situation for Rohingya refugees who are in Bangladesh. As we know, there's over 1 million that are now in the world's largest refugee camps there. And her question is, what needs to be in place for a safe, dignified repatriation to Rakhine from Bangladesh? And also, what would be a safe process, including documents for return? And she is acknowledging it would not be the NVC. So how would that work? I know that John has looked into this and has been doing a lot of monitoring of the situation in Bangladesh. So I'm wondering if, John, you can jump in here.
Yeah, thank you, Amy, and great question. Just first of all, I think widespread repatriation at this time is probably not possible. That would be refoulement. There are small trickles of Rohingya people going back to Mongdaw and Butidong because the conditions in the camps, they're going informally, not through the formal repatriation process. This is because the situation in the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh is quite restrictive. And living there is very difficult. So some families have informally gone back outside of the repatriation process. That being said, the junta took over in a coup last year and has attacked the whole population and is still persecuting Rohingya in Rakhine State, as we've shown in the report. This report is dedicated to Mohibola, a Rohingya leader who assassinated in September 2021. One of his main recommendations before he was assassinated was to have restored citizenship rights before repatriation. And that was something that a lot of Rohingya people talk about in the camps. They want security, they want safety, they want citizenship, and they want accountability before returning back to Rakhine State. So all those things need to be in place before returns can happen. Back in 2019, under the NLD government, we released a report looking at the NVC process and potential returns. One of the recommendations we put in that report was for if a government was to take over and be stable and democratic, what would need to take place for them to return. So one of our recommendations is for all kind of identity documents to be recognized. And so that means Rohingya have documents dating back many, many years. They have white cards, they have CSCs, they have NRCs, they have family list. So these cards and even testimonial evidence from their families and generations before them could be used in verification processes when Rohingya decide they want to go back to Rakhine State.
Thank you so much for that, John. So I know, Dr. Ken McLean, you need to jump off. But before you go, if you'd like to give any wrapping up remarks, and we can, if the other panelists are willing to stay on, we do have some other questions that people are interested in. So if you're okay to stay, we can continue, and other panelists, other attendees who might have more questions, please feel free to stay. But Dr. Ken McLean, if you would like to share any final remarks.
I wish I had something that would beautifully wrap this up, and I don't, because the situation is so complex. But I really think that the distinction Arsalan made about looking backwards versus looking forwards, and they're not necessarily in opposition to one another. They shouldn't be, but we need to craft better ways of doing both at the same time, so that no one, including the youth, are left out and see their futures lost, just as people before them lost their possible life choices and directions. So I think we could all do a better job, in other words, of linking the documentation that then feeds the accountability process with keeping the affected community up to date, involved, and in conversation with the relevant stakeholders to see what can be done now while we're working for justice and accountability. What can we do now so that the suffering is reduced or mitigated in some way? And I think that's an area of an improvement for human rights organizations in general, and hopefully our Rohingya friends can make suggestions on how we might do that better moving forward. So I'll stop there. My apologies for having to leave. I hope the conversation is fruitful, and best of luck and best wishes for health to everyone.
Thank you so much, Ken. We really appreciate the contributions you made to this research, and it's an issue that we always are saying never again. And I think this is an important report to remember that this is still going on and how we can stop it moving forward. So thank you so much for joining us. So just to continue, there's another question that has come in, and I think we all can have different answers to it. So I'm not sure who would like to take first stab at it, but the question has to do with the term accountability and what exactly, if the question is about elaborating about precisely what accountability means in this context and how this report contributes to that. So I think accountability can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and certainly on this panel in particular. But I'm wondering if John, you might want to kick it off and just share, around this report in particular and why this was the issue that we were looking into and how this is, where we're going with accountability on it.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. There's a lot of ongoing accountability processes taking place right now, the ICJ, the ICC, there's the IIMM. We hope that some of the information in this report could be used by the ICJ in The Hague. And we also hope that some of this information will be able to be used by the IIMM, the International Investigative Mechanism on Myanmar. So their mandate is to collect and preserve evidence. And so one of the things that we have in this report is 5 internal documents relating to that are from junta documents that talk about othering the Rohingya, so calling them Bengali or restricting their freedom of movement. And these are primary documents that are in the Burmese language that have come out after the coup. So we hope to submit these documents to international investigative mechanisms and other accountability mechanisms. But we also hope that it leads to action at the UN Security Council and that the situation is referred to the International Criminal Court or an ad hoc tribunal. The Rohingya themselves have called for this for many, many years, and they've called for the inaction to stop. There's also processes that are ongoing. A colleague and friend, Toon Kin, opened a case in Argentina, a universal jurisdiction case to hold military perpetrators accountable for the genocide that took place against his own people. So these kind of processes, we hope that this report can feed into and that they can use, hopefully moving forward. But I'll also let Dr. Parveen and Arsalan speak on the same issue.
Okay, if I may, as a Rohingya, though I find myself as a genocidal survivor, and it gives us hope. It gives us hope that the more weight is happening to the accountability people will take. We have been knocking to the UN Securities or United Nations or other organizations, other accountability processes, that there is a genocide going on. As I've said in my speech, that there is a systematic discrimination and arbitrary policies, laws where they have used a Rohingya documentation, Rohingya identification as a genocidal tool. And we see, and this report already says that the genocide is still going on. Beside, there is a case in ICC, ICJ, and universal jurisdiction, and there are other accountability processes are going on. But still, the genocide NVC is used against the Rohingyas. Still, the junta, the regime is still using NVCs to wipe us out further. So the people living inside Arakan right now are not safe. So the international community should take or fast precautions, measures to bring these perpetrators to accountability. And it is also for the local regional regions like in India, they are also using such kind of tools to wipe out Assamese, the Muslims, and the other community. I mean, other countries should start also on these such things. Such things will work. So it is very important that the international community. I know Arslan has said that it might take time and all this, but still, I hope that somebody will take such reports seriously, and on that basis, they will try to give justice to these 1 million Rohingyas who are waiting since 2017 or 16 and earlier. But after 2017, almost 1 million Rohingyas. As a Rohingya, it's a very important, which we could not bring it to the international community, which we could not bring it in the form of reports. So I'm sure it's only the positive. And I'm sure that such reports will put more weight. Thank you.
Go ahead, Arslan.
I was just going to say those are great answers, and maybe we can move on to other questions so that we can get those in.
We do have a question from a journalist, and that question is about what happened for the verification process for citizenship, which the NLD government promised when it issued the NVCs. So as we know, this was a promise that was made, and I think this is one that maybe John, you can help to answer.
Yeah, thank you, and great question. The last report we wrote looked at the problems actually under the NLD government related to the national verification card process. The violations were actually they still did not allow Rohingya to identify as Rohingya during the NVC process. This was under the NLD. We documented abuses. Like beatings related to the NVC. We documented restrictions on freedom of movement related to the NVC and livelihoods. So there's been very few Rohingya people who have been able to get citizenship through the NVC process. So you would apply for the NVC, and then afterwards you would apply for under the 1982 citizenship law for citizenship. There's 3 tiers. Under the law, associate, naturalized, and like kind of like a full citizenship. And Rohingya, we looked at in our last report, we looked at many Rohingya are not granted full citizenship rights, so they're only granted one of the other tiers, and that those tiers can be stripped of them at any time. So it's not a sustainable solution for Rohingya. So one of our recommendations is for the 1982 law to be abolished, and for citizenship in Myanmar not to have 3 categories, and it not to be based off race and ethnicity. And that's something that we recommended in the report under the NLD. And so I think, the NLD process of verifying Rohingya was really problematic. And yeah, we're happy for the journalist that asked, we're happy to share the old report and other recommendations we had for the NLD at that time.
Thank you for that, John. Also, you'll see in the chat that there's some Burmese text there. For our Burmese listeners, we're having some problem with our interpreter. So he's trying to get his headphones fixed, but I think the interpretation is coming in and out. But we can share the report, and also if you have questions, so please share it with our team, and we can follow up with you afterwards. And sorry about that. So another question is from a PhD researcher in New Delhi, Teja Khanna. He's working on she is working on statelessness of Rohingya. And the question is, I'll start with Arslan. The question is, does an apology statement issued by the National Unity Government vis-a-vis the Rohingya help the case at the International Court of Justice in any way? And then there's another question also for John, but if we can start with Arslan.
Thanks, Amy.
ICJ.
Well, what really helps in terms of the case is further evidence of the genocidal crimes committed. And so I think the actions and statements by the NUG is welcome as a reflection of the fact that the treatment of the Rohingya has been criminal and genocidal. And certainly for the societal reconciliation that needs to happen in Myanmar, it is promising to see leaders, including leaders of the NUG, making statements that acknowledge their shortcomings in the past and making commitments for reforms and changes in the future. I think that's all welcome and a necessary part of the long-term reconciliation process that is necessary to help heal Myanmar society generally. But in terms of the ICJ case, what's more helpful is evidence of what happened during the genocidal clearance operations. And to the extent that any former officials from that time period have such information and evidence to share, we would certainly call for them to make that type of evidence and information available. And they can do so through entities like the IIMM, the International Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, so that that information could then be made available to processes like at the International Criminal Court and the Gambia's case at the ICJ.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And John, there's another question that's from the same person, and it's around education, which is also an issue that I know is very important for the Rohingya people and has been a real issue because of the NVC process. The question is about recently admitted Rohingya students to Sitwe University who were forced to take the NVC cards. And the question is, were they actually admitted? And then also, can they really access this opportunity of higher education under the prevailing conditions? So I'm not sure if you know specifically about the students that this person is mentioning, but maybe you can share a little bit more about how these restrictions are affecting education for Rohingya.
Thank you, Amy, and great question. Yeah, there has, we've heard reports that a number of Rohingya students, of about a dozen or more, have been admitted to Sitwe University, the capital of Rakhine State. We've also heard reports that these students had NVC cards in order to be admitted to the university. But we have heard credible reports of that happening. And I think it's an issue that needs to be looked into. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting question. There's been many decades of Rohingya people, either because they're restricted from traveling, or there's issues between the Rakhine and Rohingya community for not being able to access education in Rakhine State. So you talk to Rohingya people that are in the internment camps and in the villages. Educational opportunities, and also there are restrictions on even accessing educational opportunities for Rohingya people in Rakhine State still. I also just want to say we're not documenting, this report is not about documenting restrictions in Bangladesh, but Bangladesh Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh right now, and the government refugee and shut down centers in the camps, and these are Rohingya genocide survivors. Persecution that's ongoing that we're talking about, and one of the baseline things that they deserve is education in those camps.
Bangladesh ma phip nede ha de patat pi lo no aro now me kon takku ka ro aro di report ne adai san ne ha phit pare
and it has to do with Rohingya trafficking. So John, I know this is going back to some issues you've been looking into. You're in high demand right now. But the question is, in the context of escalating tensions in Rakhine, how will the Rohingya be impacted, and are they increasing
Rohingya lu lu a blo lo tat ya mu de shi le
anyway linked to the NVC policy?
အဲ့တော့ဒီရိုဟင်ဂျာလူထုကဘယ်လိုလိုတရားမှုတွေရှိလဲ
Anyway, linked to the NVC policy.
အဲ့တော့ NVC ကတည်းကိုတော့ တောင်းရမယ်လို့နော် အဲ့တော့ဒီ report နဲ့ အတိုင်းအဆိုင်နဲ့ဟာဖြစ်ပါတယ်
Anyway, linked to the NVC policy.
Yeah, I think the smuggling and trafficking flows are definitely linked to the ongoing persecution in Rakhine State, and that includes
the leadership people on the Rakhine people on the
crimes against humanity around the trafficking syndicates in Thailand and Malaysia.
The Malay the Thailand jam she the Lugongu Moody about Chase and Moody she is all the three about it, but that didn't have it.
Although a bit smaller, quite a bit smaller than it was before.
Daga who Jinta solution or never be about it.
And the Thai authorities are right now
Thai and
a group of Rohingya that landed in southern Thailand.
The Thai of my Yao Bare, the Rohingya who Yai
access those people. They're potentially trafficking survivors. And
those Lugongu and
it will create unsafe routes for people to leave. Myanmar junta authorities are for leaving their villages.
The Rohingya go the
this next question is from Felicity Salina, who's with Manusha.
Now,
grassroots organization based in Bangkok. And
Bangkok, my grassroots organization
report, one of the recommendations that we have
UN Civil Society
enact a coordinated response to the NVC process.
The NVC
would it be in light of and perhaps similar actions taken vis-a-vis the Rohingya Holocaust situation?
The Rohingya
but maybe John, and I'm wondering if John might have some other thoughts also about
Dr. Pavino
the NVC process might work. But John, do you want to
NVC
In 2019, we documented how at least 5 international humanitarian organizations in Rakhine State
the Rakhine Sangama, the Lajan Sanamuda top of the where Navwe she
members
through
it allows them, those Rohingya staff and aid workers, to travel a little bit better.
The Rohingya Wanani Bono, Kitala moved to it, Nelly Pobiro, Luekuzi, the Bono,
And so one of our recommendations is for to come out with a
humanitarian
process. We've met with embassies in years, and see the major problems with the NVC process. They even foreign embassies in the region major problems with the NVC, and they
through the NVC go
hard that can help facilitate travel
through the Gaga Munity Jama, the Dwala Naimu, who you been any halogram
services to Rohingya, Kaman, and other populations in Rakhine State. But one of our recommendations is for workers that are working for humanitarian organizations, for them
the humanitarian point alone at work
for their positions to be flexible, so then they don't need to necessarily always be going to the field if they don't want to take an NVC. So yeah, those are some of our maybe practical recommendations. Yeah, handing it over.
To add with John,
John
I personally have daily contacts with my relatives, relatives, very close ones.
Through the Maundoma, she never
very critical. I have 2 aunties who are very sick, and then they have
through Nimakamki Larakama
for the doctor. So
through Siawam Piawo, Niao, Jore, Chapai Nidama, through NBC City.
I think what I got it, there are still some organizations are still working, but they don't pay so much of attention and such that, and we see is a genocidal tool, further genocidal tool of genocide.
Against the Rohingyas, they don't pay so much attention. Rohingya တွေပေါ်မှာဒီလူမျိုးတို့တတ်မှတ်မှုရဲ့ကရိယာလို့မမြင်ကြဘူး if you I mean some Rohingyas come to them or Rohingya တွေသူတို့စီလာပြီးတော့ civil society members say this is a Rohingya, this guy, he is a Rohingya, you know,လာပြီးတော့သူကRohingya ပါဆိုပြီး it's better that you present yourself as a I mean Rakhine or ကိုနေနဲ့Rakhine လို့ပြောတာပိုကောင်း or even they avoid. Unfortunately, the civil society over there, they avoid, and the civil society က still people don't understand that this is a genocide against အဲ့တော့ဒီလူတွေကပေါ့နော်ဒီ MVC ကဒီလူမျိုးတို့တတ်မှတ်မှုမှာတောင်းတဲ့လက်နက်ကရိယာလို့မမြင်ကြဘူးပေါ့နော် other issues they will say but they don't see it as a genocide. Unfortunately, သူတို့တွေနေတဲ့ဒီဂျာကလူမျိုးတို့တတ်မှတ်မှုမှာတောင်းတဲ့ကရိယာလို့မမြင်ကြဘူး Burmese people are there, but I believe that the Rohingyas went through the genocide. Thank you. 54တန်းတော့ဒီပြည်သူလူထုမှာတော်တော်များများပေါ့နော်Rohingya တွေကိုလူမျိုးတို့တတ်မှတ်မှုကျူးလွန်နေတယ်လို့မယုံကြည်ကြဘူး
quite a long time, so I'm going to try and bring them into the room to ask their question directly. So this isတင်စာဦးကနေမေးခွန်းမေးချင်ပါတယ် See if we can bring them in.
ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီpanel ထဲမှာကျွန်တော်သူ့ကိုဖိတ်ခေါ်လို့ရမလားဆိုကြည့်လိုက်မယ်
So if not, then I'll go over to here Tinsaru is.
Tinsaru ဝင်လာပါတယ်Tinsaru ကြားပါလား
Yes, thank you very much.
ကျေးဇူးများတင်ပါတယ်
Actually wanted to follow up on you know I am trying to like bridge these two issues
အဲ့တော့ဒီကိစ္စနှစ်ခုကိုပေါ့နော်ဆက်ချင်တာပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်တို့အရင်ရေးကြည့်တဲ့ဟာကိုအဲ့တော့ဒီ panel တွေကအဲ့တော့ဒီ Rohingya ဘယ်လိုမျိုးတော့တပတ်မှာအသုံးပြုတဲ့နီလန်းတွေကြောင်းနောက်ပြီးတော့နောက် MVC ကကောပေါ့နော်အဲ့တော့
we have a very specific Rohingya League kind of you know legal aid cases specific
အဲ့တော့ကျွန်တော်တို့စီမှာဒီ Rohingya တွေကဒီဥဆောင်နဲ့ဥပဒေထောက်ကူပြုအဖွဲ့တွေရှိတယ်ပေါ့နော်ဒီလူကုန်ကူးမှုတွေမှာ
2019 and 20 so what
2019 2020မှာ
change in the courts is that when
အဲ့တော့ဒီတရားရုံးမှာပြောင်းသွားတာက
human trafficking victims who
အဲ့တော့ဒီလူကုန်ကူးခံရတဲ့ကျူးလွန်ခံသူရှိတယ်
with the MVC card and even with the pink card
အဲ့တော့ဒီ MVC ကတ်နဲ့ကို
what happened to
အဲ့တော့ဒီနိုင်ငံသားစစ်စီကပ်ပြပါရင်တော့မှအဲ့တော့ဒီလူကုန်ကူးခံရသူတွေကိုရာဇဝတ်ကောင်လို့သူတို့ဆက်ဆံခံရတယ်သူတို့အနေနဲ့ကျူးလွန်ခံရသူလို့ဆက်ဆံခံရဘူး
they as the victims were you know sort of arrested and detained
အဲ့တော့သူတို့တွေအဖမ်းခံရတဲ့အချိန်
like 5 years to
အဲ့တော့သူတို့9နှစ်လို့ထောင်ဒဏ်တွေချခံရတယ်
like very long you know prison sentences because of the breach of citizenship laws so
because ဒါဘာကြောင့်လဲဆိုတော့ဒီနိုင်ငံသားဥပဒေကြောင့်မနော်
for the 2 years between 2019 and 2020
အဲ့တော့ဒီ2019နဲ့2020ကြားမှာ
the Navy was considering them victims also thanks to UN Special Envoy Office
UN Special Envoy ကြောင့်
who kicked in
အဲ့တော့ဒီအာဏာသိမ်းမှုလဲအာဏာသိမ်းပြီးတော့ဒီခုနလုပ်ငန်းစဉ်တွေပြောင်းပြန်နေဖြစ်သွားတယ်
what we are trying to say is why
ကျွန်တော်တို့ပြောချင်တာက
since February 1st 2021 until now just
အဲ့တော့ဒီ February 2021ကနေအခုချိန်ထိ
we are ongoing with this like ICJ case why
ICJ လည်းဆက်သွားနေတဲ့အခါမှာ
Credentials Committee decision is still pending and why we
ဒီ Credential Committee အခုတည်းဒီဆုံးဖြတ်ချက်ကနှောင့်နှေးနေဦးပေါ့နော်
particular case we are ongoing with military as sort of like a counterparty so what I'm trying to say is
အဲ့တော့ကျွန်မပြောချင်တာက
logical because they are the one who actually committed all these atrocities, and especially in the
form of
indirectly. Does it help us as like for the Rohingyas, especially because if we were to recognize the Jomoton and the NUG government as the elected government, if they say they admitted, yes, they committed that crime and then they need to be fixed, then the problem is almost... in place right away, in Burma, So is it not something, that can be more direct and a faster route than engaging with the military as the counterparty in this like ICJ case? Because we're still confused. Just trying to shut us up by saying, okay, we are doing things, great. So military is not doing that. So I am frustrated on the ground because big spike in the trafficking cases, and every single case is getting worse than how it's still happening. So I'm just thinking out loud as in, is ICJ thing, if the NUG admitted they have this apology, if
the ICJ ma NUG we can do
because we
Mr.
Solomon case like way forward.
Mr. Solomon she said in
GSC General Strike Committee, there were leaders there. They're still, and then we also
GSC with the
NUG and the current stakeholders.
the stakeholder the way forward
military and ICJ things going. There is nothing happening there yet. Even
the ICJ
acknowledging military as a legitimate government, and if so, will that?
The ICJ the
I just wanted to get some thoughts from you.
And just all the challenges that you're raising. Arsalan, do you want to address that?
Arsalan, ICJ
I'll just say that
the frustration of the see the elected government be recognized as the government because you would want to see the elected governments have that recognition. Did in terms of its process for the junta regime to represent in the latest explain its that the president read out when she began the hearing in which the president recognized governments the party in the proceeding. Something along the state I think the takeaway there is that the fact that the court allowed the junta representatives to a statement on their legitimacy. It's not a statement on their whether it's right for them to do so or not. I think what that was that the court determined in terms of de facto control of the majority of the state functions and therefore ဒီအာဏာပိုင်တွေကိုထိန်းချုပ်တာကစစ်တပ်ဖြစ်တဲ့အတွက်
most fully exercises the levers of power of the state that they would be more
နိုင်ငံရဲ့ဒီအာဏာကိုထိန်းချုပ်နေတာဖြစ်တဲ့အတွက်သူတို့ကတင့်တော်တဲ့အဖွဲ့အစည်းဖြစ်တယ်လို့သူတို့ကသတ်မှတ်တာဖြစ်တယ်အဲ့တော့ဒါကတရားဝင်ဖြစ်မှုကိုအသိအမှတ်ပြုတာမဟုတ်ဘူး
who can accord other governments with legitimacy. And so it's really a matter of encouraging other states to recognize NUG if that's what the community wants to see happen. And so
the NUG ကိုအတိအမှတ်ပြုတာကိုပဲလိုချင်တာဖြစ်တယ်
for example, I mean that is I think in the international system generally the procedure by which
achieve
recognition by the actions of other states and
အဲ့တော့ဒီဟာကနိုင်ငံတကာဒီအစိုးရတစ်ခုကိုအတိအမှတ်ပြုတာကတခြားနိုင်ငံတွေကလှုံ့ဆော်ခြင်းနဲ့ပဲသူအတိအမှတ်ပြုတာဖြစ်တယ်
the United Nations collectively reject the coup and condemn the coup and others
အဲ့တော့ဒီကုလသမဂ္ဂကလည်းအာဏာသိမ်းမှုကိုဒါကန့်ကွက်ထားတာဖြစ်တယ်
it's a very unfortunately frustrating situation because
အဲ့တော့ဒါကလည်းစိတ်ပျက်စရာကောင်းတဲ့အခြေအနေဖြစ်တယ်
exercising and executing a coup
အဲ့တော့ဒီအာဏာသိမ်းတဲ့စစ်တပ်က
suffering it's the government that was legitimately elected
အဲ့တော့ဖြစ်ချခံတဲ့တရားဝင်ရွေးချယ်ခံရတဲ့အစိုးရဖြစ်ချခံရတာက
allowed to exercise the powers that it was elected to do so and so
အဲ့တော့သူတို့တွေအနေနဲ့ပေါ့နော်ဒီရွေးချယ်ခံရပြီးတော့မှတဲ့အာဏာသုံးခွင့်မရှိတာက
and what the court said on it and again it wasn't anything that the Gambia as a party to the case was able to weigh in on or to even comment on that was the court it's the court
အဲ့တော့ဒီ Gambia ကနေပြီးတော့မှတော့မှတ်ချက်မပေးနိုင်ဘူးအဲ့တော့ဒါကတရားရုံးကသာလင်းဆုံးဖြတ်နိုင်တဲ့ကိစ္စဖြစ်တယ်ပေါ့နော်
gives us a good direction of areas where we can focus on for advocacy and
ဒါကျမတို့ကနေပြီးတော့မှဒါကနေပြီးတော့မှ advocacy ဘိုင်းမှာဒါဆက်လက်ပြီးတော့လှုပ်ဆောင်နိုင်မယ့်ဟာပဲဖြစ်တယ်ပေါ့နော်
I think we're about out of time so
အဲ့တော့ကျမတို့ဒီအချိန်ကပြည့်ပြီဆိုတော့
any final reflections or
အဲ့တော့နောက်ဆုံးမှတ်ချက်များpanelist တွေပြီးကျင်ပါလား ကျမတို့ဒီ Dr. Parveen ကိုနောက်ဆုံးမှတ်ချက်လေးများပေးစီချင်ပါတယ်အဲ့တော့45 right ကိုလည်းကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ကျမခုနပြောခဲ့သလိုပဲအဲ့တော့ဒါဒီအစီအခံစာတွေကနေပြီးတော့မှဒီဖိအားပေးနိုင်စေမယ့်အရာတွေဖြစ်ပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီကျူးလွန်သူတွေကိုသူတို့တရားတာဝန်ခံစေမှုမြန်မြန်ခံစေမှုရှိပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီကနေ report ကနေပါအစင်းဒီလို report ကနေအဲ့တော့ဒီဘယ်လိုတပတ်မှုတွေမှာရွန်ဂျာပြည်သူတွေနဲ့ဘယ်လိုမျိုးဖြစ်ကလေးဆိုတော့တမိုင်းဖြစ်စေမှာဖြစ်တယ်ကျမတို့ interview တွေပေးခဲ့တယ်
don't have those facilities to think to write to make it so professional
ကျမတို့ဒီမှာဒီ professional လို့မရေးနိုင်ဘူးဘာဖြစ်လို့လဲဆိုတော့ကျမတို့မှာပညာရေးကင်းမဲ့တွေဖြစ်တယ်
one of them we never had the education to fight for our people
ကျမတို့ဒီပြည်သူတွေဒီ5လောက်ဖို့အတွက်ကအဲ့တော့ကျမတို့မှတ်တမ်းတင်ဖို့အတွက်ကျမတို့မှာပညာရေးမသင်ခဲ့ရအောင်အဲ့တော့ဒီတာဝန်ခံမှုတွေတစ်စင်ဒါအချိန်ယူရတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့အဲ့ဒါကကျမတို့အနေနဲ့ဆက်ပြီးတော့မှပညာမတတ်ဖြစ်ရစေမယ်လို့မဟုတ်ဘူး
but we want to write our own stories
ကျမတို့အနေနဲ့ကျမတို့တမိုင်းကိုရေးချင်တယ်ကျမတို့ကိုပန်ပေးပါကျမတို့စက္ကူတွေပေးပါအဲ့တော့ဒီ plastic ဒီတက်နေတဲ့ဆိုင်
repatriate us with full citizenship rights
ကျမတို့ကိုဒီနိုင်ငံသားဖြစ်မှုအပြည့်နဲ့ကျမတို့ပြန်ခွင့်မပေးနိုင်ဘူးဆိုရင်ကျမတို့ကိုပန်နဲ့ကျမတို့ကိုစာရွက်ပေးပါသူဒီကလေးတွေကသူတို့ရဲ့တရားမျှတမှုတွေစောင့်နေတဲ့ကလေးတွေအတွက်ဒီ report တွေကနေပြီးတော့အကူအညီထောက်ကူဖြစ်မယ်လို့ကျမလည်းမျှော်လင့်ပါတယ်
further document the genocidal coups happening against Rohingyas in our country. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Perveen.
ကျေးဇူးအများကြီးတင်ပါတယ် Dr. Perveen.
Arsalan, can we go to you next for final thoughts, final reflections?
The Arsalan, no, so muchများပါများပြပါလေ fortified rightဖွဲ့လို့ the Rohingya community got Dr. Perveen or Jesus de Mare. The advocacy, the maternity Mudigo, looked at it.
I just wanted to close by saying that
a big George in Agaro.
process is continuing.
ICG, the answer to my select to anybody.
Preliminary objections.
The Jumaro, the Ayunga Biroma, the Kanau Kangwamuri Boma, Soviet Sound about it.
At that phase and after that.
Ariha B.
So I just wanted to.
And now the thing
Who does this important documentation work and the advocacy work, and I know it's
the Matadinello, the advocacy loan that by Niba.
especially in the current context.
Through the drug out of CPS and the county government.
And are spreading and are
Generally, the association Longa, Celeste Sound Safety Party.
groups and everyone across the country in Myanmar. And so I know it's a very tough situation, but
Dialect Chinese around the body.
it's really important. And
The local young Yiki.
change can happen, and I think
Dilo Chinese Ngale, down lady got people named Dima Pipare. Jesus de Mare, Aslan. Jongo, not so much at the Jamare.
That are still tuned in. I really appreciate it. Just on the Rohingya, kind of pulling off what Dr. Parveen was saying, there's many
Dr. Parveen Pure Rinjari Jamano.
in Bangladesh, in Myanmar, and globally
Manangane, the Bangladesh machine.
that have been raising the alarm, that have been talking about the NVC process and its problems for a long time, much before.
The MBC case on the Piatana, Pionera, draw Java.
Doing our documentation work. So yeah, I'm appreciative of those Rohingya groups. And they
Thank you so much. I know there was a lot of questions that are still coming in.
When Lashi Bare.
There's so much interest in this.
The Hanapata Viro, when Ramu Yashida, Jesus de Mare.
We also have a film coming,
Jamaro,
a short film that summarizes
the report, the addition that they go, change out family Shibare.
media platforms. But we really appreciate the time that people have come in and
Jamaro, the Deola Dumia, Chayole Lisa,
this conversation, and hopefully we can continue
Diane Biroma, the Megoniane, engaged local Jesus de Mare.
for joining and for your
Aslan, the press conference, Bawanet, Jesus de Chibare.
also Dr. Parveen for all that
Now, Dr. Parveen,
it truly means a lot to so many
Dale, the Luteromia,
everybody for tuning in and
Alone, the Jesus de Chibare.
yeah, we
Report will download you.